Welcome, it's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest Lou Correa, member of the California State Senate. And you recently took a trip to Mexico. You chair the California-Mexico Select Committee in the Senate. Obviously, you learned a lot, but there was one issue that really got you thinking, and that dealt with children who may have been born in America or came here young and then moved back to Mexico. Why don't you tell us what you learned?
Well, again, big picture.
Please.
Pulling back a couple of steps. Mexico is our biggest trading partner. It's not China, it's Mexico, and Mexico, trade with Mexico is bigger than China and the next three countries put together. The most cross-border in the world is California, Mexico.
Right.
A lot of cultural ties, et cetera, et cetera. And as you know, in the last several years under the Obama administration, you've had record deportations of undocumented from the U.S. and a lot are from California. So as part of this committee that I have, my job is go check out what's going on in Mexico as it relates to California.
Please.
Found out that there's a lot of these American citizens, American-born children, not only in Mexico but other countries, that have left. Their parents are deported.
Right.
They're leaving with a family, and now they're growing up in small villages throughout Mexico. And the question is, when these young men and women turn 18 and they decide to come back to the U.S.
Because many can, because as you said, they're American born.
They're American citizens, what then? And what I've done is essentially thought to myself, between now and when they turn 18, when they come back, I want to make sure they're productive American citizens. Means they have an education. I want to make sure while they're in Mexico, they get their high school diploma, they stay out of trouble, they stay out away from drugs, the good life, good clean life. So what my bill says, if you do all the above, you apply to a University of California, Cal State system, the first year you will pay tuition as though you're a California resident.
Which can save literally tens of thousands of dollars, literally.
But what's most important is it's symbolic. Right. What it's telling these young men and women, young American citizens, not only Mexico, throughout the world.
Sure.
And it says, at the right time, we have something for you at the end of the rainbow, which is the promise of an education that you can afford.
Now, if that individual was undocumented, him or herself, and they moved back because their entire family was deported, can they apply to this program, or do they need to have been American citizens?
This is strictly for American citizens growing up abroad that were deported against their will, meaning they left with their family.
Right.
Now I have to tell you, this is not new. In the 1930s, when we had the Great Depression, massive number of Mexicans were deported, and a lot of those American citizens.
Right.
And when those folks grew up in the 40s, you have essentially that scenario being repeated. Deported in the 30s, in the 40s, you had massive immigration of American citizens coming back to the U.S.
The question is, and I understand the governor did sign this bill.
That's correct.
How do you make these high school students, let's say, who are being educated in Mexico, how do they become aware of this program? Because obviously it's one that is going to benefit them tremendously. Is there a way to get out the good news?
This whole process is very interesting because the way I found out about this issue is a lot of these Mexican legislators who I was talking say, hey, what do we got in common? They were telling me, we're trying to help these American citizens get documented, meaning we got to get their school records from the U.S., we got to get their vaccination records. We have to have all the records in order to put them in Mexican schools and get them ready to move to the next step. U.S. consulate in Mexico, given that they're responsible for American citizens abroad, are also having to address this issue. So I think you have the beginnings of a network here to begin to establish the information.
Because honestly, I mean, there's so many steps one needs to take to be admitted to CSU, UC. I mean, you may not know this, but can one take the SAT in a Mexican village or even in Tijuana?
Well, they're going to have to, because this is not affirmative action.
No, I know.
This doesn't say you have a special privilege to get in.
But I guess maybe I'm pushing you a bit, but I just feel as if this could really, it is the end of the rainbow. But in order to get on that arc, how how do we get them this information? How do we get them SATs?
Well, let me flip it around.
Please.
These kids were playing Nintendo and God knows what. One day, the next day, they're looking at a place that maybe has electricity and running water. Okay? And what I'm telling them is, don't despair. Work hard, get the grades, take the SAT in Mexico, and get yourself back.
I'm just wondering if there's a way, and surely this is beyond the purview of the bill, that you or someone can work with the consulate in Mexico to make them aware of this program, and get SAT prep, whatever it may be.
You're reading my thoughts, which is, how do we address this issue?
Right.
Because in this new world, we want engineers, we want,
Right.
rocket scientists. We want to make sure the education level is high. I mean, you talk about immigration reform. This is the other side of that other thing we're doing, which is we're bringing these very intelligent foreign students, primarily Chinese, Indians from other countries.
Right.
We give them their doctorate in our most important sciences, and then we tell them, you can't stay, you
Right.
got to go back home
That's a whole
and
other
compete against us.
Right, that's a whole other issue. I know Congressman
But this
Schiff, for example, is looking at that. But that's a federal issue.
But again, that's an ancillary issue related, and until the feds can figure out what to do right, California moves ahead.
Now, what's interesting is, so they get that first year under the resident rate, and so I thought to myself, well, that's great, it's only the first year, but once you live here for a year,
Then you're a resident.
then you're a resident.
That's correct.
So has the good word gotten out? I mean, you took this trip fairly recently, and somehow you got this bill through, and it's been signed.
The word is just now
Of
getting out.
course.
The bill was just signed a couple of days
Oh,
ago.
yes, literally, yeah.
But you talk about my trip.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how the poor state of the relationship between California and Mexico. I led the first official California Senate delegation to Mexico last year in the history of the state of California.
How is that possible?
Well, again, as Californians, we've never looked at international relations as being something that we're concerned about.
Right, but with
and number
NAFTA,
two, the governor's gone to China,
Yeah.
but he hasn't looked at Latin America. And so I think what we need to do as legislators say, hey, there's a lot of neat stuff going on in other places of the world. Let's take advantage of it and create more California jobs. Keep California as the golden state.
What else did you learn? We have a couple more minutes, and I'm fascinated. What other tidbits nuggets you were able to glean, and therefore will take back to the legislature as a way to make life better for both Californians
You
and
have
Mexicans?
2 minutes. I'd have 2 days
Of
to
course,
explain
of
to you
course.
this stuff.
But
Issues of pollution, clean energy, societal. Our drug problems are their drug problems. We complain about the drugs. They complain about the guns, violence on both sides of the border.
it's just so interesting.
Very similar issues.
We're so close to the Mexican border. I mean, we're in Los Angeles, Long Beach today. What, 2.5 hours away?
That's correct.
If we went 2.5 hours north, we'd be in, beautiful San Luis Obispo.
Bakersfield,
Bakersfield,
somewhere, yes.
whatever it is. And yet 2.5 hours south, we enter a place where there's a lot of heartache and just
A lot of heartache
stress.
and a lot of opportunity, a lot of economic growth. And what I like to do is make sure that it benefits Californians, that we also take advantage of those jobs that are being created. I want to make sure that when we have that in manufacturing, that it's a California job that's being created,
Right.
not a job from any other country.
Are we creating scenarios whereby there can be cross-border traffic for jobs? Because I have to think, and I know you represent Orange County, but in San Diego and Tijuana, the ability to kind of go in between the border for employment purposes, or is it still bollocksed up in this immigration reform debate?
There's a lot of job creation, but that border right now is brutal to cross. The enforcement, it takes you 3 to 4 hours to get across north, but now the Mexicans are afraid of all of the weapons being exported, so now it takes you
Right.
an hour to get into Mexico.
I thank you for joining us. His name is Lou Correa, member of the California State Senate. When we come back, we'll be speaking with a professor from Cal State LA about an exhibit called American Sabor, U.S. Latinos in Pop Culture Music. We'll be right back.
In 2012, how many individuals were apprehended for attempting to illegally cross the United States border from Mexico? 250, 100,000, 357, 100,000, 513, 100,000, or 698,000. The United States Border Patrol reported that nearly 357,000 tried to sneak across the U.S. border from Mexico.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Victor Viesca, he is a professor at Cal State LA, and I am really excited for an exhibit that's coming to the college. It will be there from November 16th to February 9th. It's called American Sabor, Latinos in Popular Music. Sabor means
flavor.
Right, and look, if you're from Los Angeles, if you're from California, you know the soulful sounds of Latino music.
Right.
And what's so wonderful about it is this exhibit is going to be highlighting 5 cities that have really helped Latino music grow up in America. I want to talk about those 5 cities. Let's start with Los Angeles.
Okay, great.
Tell us about the Latino music scene in Los Angeles and how we can learn more about it at the exhibit.
Well, the Latino popular music scene here in LA goes back throughout the 20th century into the 21st century, but this exhibit focuses on the post-World War II era. So we're going to have information, music, and artifacts from several Los Angeles groups like Los Lobos.
I mean, that's a quintessential Los Angeles group. Los Lobos. We think about Richie Valens. I mean, it really kind of typifies what we think about in terms of Los Angeles Latino
Right,
sound.
exactly. And the location where the exhibit's going to be, Cal State LA, is in central East Los Angeles, where Los Lobos are from.
Right.
But we're also going to have groups from the Chicano punk rock scene, like Los Iligos, Alice Bag, The Brat, hip hop from LA, like Aquid, and several other groups from the area, but also throughout Los Angeles.
And what makes Los Angeles unique in terms of its Latino sabor is its diversity.
Right.
When we talk about the other cities, we'll see it's easier, it's more tangible to say, this city is known for this specifically. So let's talk about the next city that's going to be featured at the exhibit, and it is San Francisco.
Right.
San Francisco is known for what?
Well, of course, Santana, though. Santana is originally from Tijuana. He got his fame and spread, the Latin rock music in San Francisco. So a highlight of San Francisco and the Bay Area is Santana and that 1960s counterculture rock scene.
It's hard to deny that Carlos Santana is one of the most successful musicians of our time.
Oh, yes.
And his longevity defies gravity. Why? What is it about him that he has such cross-cultural appeal?
Well, I think he was part of the 1960s rock and roll movement, but he blended Latin music sounds, and the rest of the United States has become more Latino. So you can say that part of his longevity has to do with the fact that Latinos now are a bigger part of the U.S. population.
But even in the suburbs, I mean, look, we're all listening to Santana. I mean, who doesn't love some guitar by Carlos Santana?
Right. Well, I mean, I think he's special, pretty much.
Special.
But the way he blends several sounds, not just he is of Mexican descent, but also Caribbean sounds.
Everything.
African American sounds.
Speaking of the Caribbean, we must talk about Miami.
Right.
I mean, I think about Gloria Estefan.
Right.
I remember when Ricky Martin performed, I think it was at the Grammys. And literally, it blew the audience away. I think it was Madonna went up to him after the performance. I mean, his life, I'm getting chills on his behalf because his life was transformed at that single moment. And Gloria and Ricky really kind of define the Miami sound.
The Miami sound machine.
Yes.
In fact, Miami is considered the entertainment capital of all Latin America because it sits right in the Caribbean where a lot of the music comes from, including, Mexico, the Circum-Caribbean around Veracruz.
So why is it that sound has lasted, has permeated, has been propelled into the pop culture in your mind?
Well, I think one of the things that the exhibit points out, as with the name American Sabor, is that
Yeah.
it's got flavor,
Right.
and I think
And America is the first word of that.
Right, right. And so these kind of groups, musicians, have brought that flavor of the Caribbean and the Americas into the United States and made it now mainstream. I think this is what the exhibit is trying to show.
And who would have thunk that salsa music
Yeah.
would become mainstream? Even a dork like me has taken salsa classes with my wife. I mean, it really is another example of how the Latino American Sabor flavor has really blended so beautifully into American culture. And salsa grew up where?
In New York City, though its roots are in Cuba and Puerto Rico. It migrated with the Puerto Ricans in the 1950s into New York City, and from New York City, which was itself an entertainment capital,
Right.
spread throughout the
Was
United
it
States.
the kind of that whole West Side Story era when that
Right.
kind of salsa flavor snuck in and really grabbed the heart and soul
Yes.
of Americans,
I
Latino
mean,
and otherwise?
New York gave us mambo and
Oh,
salsa,
right.
and especially in the late 1960s, great artists like Eddie and Charlie Palmieri, Hector Lavoe, Willie Colon spread the music around. And here, so what the exhibit does is show the diversity of Latinos in the United States through their cultural production, through their popular
I mean,
music.
it's funny. Here we live in California, and we're very much focused on Mexican Americans.
Right, right.
But if you're in Miami or in New York, it's Puerto Ricans, it's
Cubans,
Cubans, Dominicans. I mean, we have Central
Colombians.
Americans, but of course. But
Right.
I want to talk about San Antonio and what we know as Tejano music.
Right,
And we
right.
think about Selena. I mean, I remember in the 90s when we lost her, and, you know, in a bit of irony, how her death catapulted Jennifer Lopez
Right.
to fame because she
Yes.
played Selena so
That's right.
miraculously in that
Right,
film.
right.
But in some ways, do you feel as if her death pushed Tejano into the mainstream? If she would not have died, it wouldn't have become so popular?
Well, actually, I think she helped push it into the mainstream.
During her life.
Yes, I think she popularized it, and she gave a role model to Latinas of all origins throughout the United States. So she was becoming, and she was at the time a big star. She was becoming a great
She was
star.
crossing over.
Unfortunately,
Right.
she was killed
Right.
in her prime.
So did Selena give us Christina Aguilera, Selena Gomez? I'm trying to think of other
Yes.
Latino artists that
Right.
clearly have tremendous crossover appeal, kind of in and outside of. I mean, Christina Aguilera, I think, does have kind of a Latin flavor. Selena
Yes.
Gomez, I don't think as much.
Though she might be named after Selena.
I wonder. I mean, at the age would make sense.
Right, and I think that she not only influenced a whole generation of Latinas to become part of the entertainment industry, but I think she also made the music industry understand that Latinas
Right.
could cross over.
Who was the actress that we sadly lost? A singer who we sadly lost from Long Beach recently in a plane crash.
Oh, Jenny Rivera.
Yeah, tell us
Yes.
about Jenny. I mean, what was her flavor?
Well, Jenny Rivera was a ranchera singer. She was part of the banda phenomenon
Right.
here in Los Angeles, and you're right, in Long Beach
Right.
specifically.
Right.
So the exhibit, when we talk about Los Angeles, is not only salsa,
Right.
Chicano rock, Latin rock. It's also banda.
Right.
And it was mostly Mexican Americans, Central Americans who made it popular here in the United States, and now it's popular all over Latin America, even in Puerto Rico.
So it went the other way.
Yes, exactly.
How
Even though it
interesting.
started, or became, not started, the roots are in Mexico,
Right.
but it became popularized
So it
here
went both
in Los
ways.
Angeles. Yes.
So
back and forth.
where does Latino music go from here? Do all these genres have staying power, or does one seem to really be capturing the imagination of Americans, Latino and non-Latino?
You know, I think that salsa is crossing over to even the Asian American community here in Los Angeles. Salsa is very popular in Japan, so I think that
amazing.
that is an international music,
Right.
and because itself, its origins are from Africa, from
Yeah.
the Americas, from European culture.
Right.
So I think that sound has spread all over, but the different kinds of musics that are popular among Latinos here represent the diversity of the Latino population.
I'm very glad
in the
you
United
came.
States.
Thank you for joining us. The exhibit at Cal State LA is running from November 16th to February 9th. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Roberto Uranga. I'm Brad Pomerance, it's Charter California Edition.
As of July 1st, 2012, how many individuals of Hispanic descent lived in the United States? 38, 45, 53, or 60 million? According to the United States Census Bureau, the Hispanic population in the United States reached 53 million in 2012.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Roberto Uranga. He is with the Board of Trustees of the Long Beach Community College District. He is also a candidate for City Council in Long Beach. That election will be held in April of 2014. But I want to start and speak about the community college districts in California. We have, I think it's 79 districts, is that right?
72.
72 districts, 112 colleges.
Correct.
And we know that some districts are facing severe challenges.
Yes, they are.
San Francisco City College is under the threat of closure.
Actually, it is scheduled to close next year.
Right, which is very scary. It's the largest district in the entire country, educating 90,000 students about. There are lawsuits pending against the accrediting agency. What's your sense of what's happening at San Francisco City? And I ask you specifically because you had been the president of the
National Association of Community College Trustees.
Right, so you know from what you speak.
Well, I hope so.
Yes.
Basically, what it comes down to is that San Francisco City College did not do its homework. It basically allowed its budget to get out of control. The trustees did not make adjustments and changes to their budgets as they should have, which is their fiduciary responsibility to keep the college stable and functioning. What ended up happening is that their budget went out of control. They went below the threshold of what a community college should be in terms of a college of that size. And the accrediting agency came in and said, you guys have not been responsible.
Right. You're done.
And you need to restructure yourself. So the current plan.
But more than that. I mean, not restructure yourself. You need to close.
Well, yes and no. I mean, they're going to close as a City College of San Francisco. However, the campuses will probably be farmed out to other districts so that the students don't completely lose out on their education.
I think about, is it Compton College?
Compton College is one of those, for example, about 6 or 7 years ago, it lost its accreditation and it was picked up by El Camino Community College, so it's under them. El Camino did get a boost in their budget to be able to absorb Compton Community College in there. Now, Compton wants to bring the community college back into their community.
Right, I know they're going through
and they're
that.
making those efforts, and they're trying to regain their accreditation, and they're working hard at it. Haven't been able to do it as yet. There are still some challenges in the community college district that needs to be taken care of and need to be addressed. And once those are, I think that they will be successful.
What do you make, though, of the allegations brought by several in lawsuits against the Accrediting Commission? And the city of San Francisco has sued, claiming bias, conflict of interest, unfair business practices. The Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, has even gone after the Accrediting Committee. What do you make of this?
Well, there needs to be some kind of impartial, objective body that evaluates community colleges or any other agency in terms of their performance. It's unfortunate that these lawsuits are taking place because of the fact that the ACCJC is trying to do as much as it can to make sure that quality is upmost in the minds of the community colleges, and they're basically trying to do their job.
Right.
And these lawsuits, while they may have some merit to them, still, I would rather look at how can we make things better.
Fix the problem.
Exactly.
Don't litigate the problem.
Exactly.
So, for argument's sake, the lawsuits go away. What happens to, how many colleges do they have at San Francisco City? Is it 9 campuses?
They have probably a lot more because they have a lot of little satellite offices as well.
So do they start getting picked up geographically? I don't know, Moraine will take some, or Contra Costa will take some.
That's going to be the challenge for San Francisco City College and that for that area in regards to where do these campuses go.
Now, this begs the question, though, because we think about the last few years. I saw that Cal State Sacramento did a study, and it indicated that 62 institutions in California at the community college level were subject to some form of sanction over the last decade.
Including Long Beach.
Including Long Beach. I was unaware of that. Mission College recently, Los Angeles Southwest College, Cuesta, College of the Redwoods, I think it's called. I mean, we've seen this. Cuesta was close to being shut down. It now has been pulled back off the severest form of sanction.
Santa Barbara.
Why is this happening? I mean, was it just a tough decade economically? Was it the trustees weren't minding the store? What's your sense?
Well, it's a combination of a lot of factors, but mostly it's the fact that in the last 7 or 8 years, community colleges have been challenged with budgets,
right.
Terrible budgets,
right.
Budget cuts. I mean, the last budget cycle we received about a $400 million cut.
Well, think about this.
When the UCs and the CSUs received $500 million each, so it was like a $1.4 billion cut to education.
Well, I think,
and Prop 30 came.
Yeah, I mean, I think during this economic recession, community colleges lost, I think, $1.5 billion. I mean, it was a massive cut.
And that creates challenges.
Right, and what's also interesting is in the background, we obviously are doing better in terms of our state budget, but when you look at what Governor Brown is looking to fully fund education-wise, it's K-12. It's not K-14, and it's not UC and CSU. I mean, arguments can be made both ways, but as I understand it, K-12 has been fully restored to pre-recession levels. Community colleges have not, UCs have not, CSUs have not. And so where do community colleges go from here? The bleeding has stopped, but there's still a wound.
Oh, obviously. And Prop 30 is a Band-Aid.
Right, and it doesn't give money to community colleges.
Not at the levels that they need.
I mean, because K-12 is getting more money through Prop 30 than maybe community colleges can get through the back door.
And you have to remember that community colleges and K-12s are tied together through Prop 98.
Right, that's another very important point.
Which is the formula by which K-12s and community colleges get funded.
About 40% of the budget must go to K-14?
Actually, more like around 88% or so. Community college, 12% of that total budget goes to community colleges.
Right, but meaning 40% of the state budget, as I understand it, must be dedicated to K-14. You're saying 12%.
Well, through Prop 98.
Right, through Prop 98. So be that as it may, how is it feeling this year, though? I have to think that it feels a lot better than last year. I mean, last year you were forced to cut some certificate programs. You were cutting class sections. How does it look today at Long Beach City? As an example.
Oh, we're optimistic. Everything is getting better. We still have ways to go to get back to pre-2007 funding and classes. Let me just address the classes that were cut. The certificate programs.
Right.
I'm sorry. There were certificate programs, meaning that individuals would have to take 21 and above units to get a certificate or a diploma in those classes. It does not mean that the classes went away. It means that
thank you for that clarification.
If a person still wants to take classes in photography, automotive, welding, sheet metal, they can take those classes. They are still there. What's gone is the ability to get a certificate or a diploma, because that's how we're measured.
But if the classes are still there, why not give the certificate? What's the funding question?
Well, because the funding, the question is, a person needs to get a certificate or a diploma. A person needs to take a X number of units, and to take those X number of units means additional faculty that need to teach those classes. So when the certificate program or diploma program goes away, you cut those classes, but the availability of the classes to take at the lower levels are still there. And let's face it, many students who go to community colleges to earn a trade, be it carpentry, automotive, whatever, they take those few classes, and then we there's a term that we call job out. They get a job, and they don't come back. They don't come back to finish and complete the program because they get enough skills, they feel, and obviously the employers feel that if they can change the brakes fix the brakes, change the oil.
Good enough.
Whatever, I mean, you've demonstrated that you have some ability, and then you go from there. The certification that a journey level mechanic needs, as an example, they get somewhere else. You know, when you go to your auto body shop or your your auto dealership to
Sure.
get your car serviced, you know, they have this AFC.
I've seen that, yes.
Okay, we don't provide those. Those are received somewhere else through master mechanics who teach those individuals how to get
I see
that
what you're
certification so that they are certified as master mechanics.
I got it. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. When you come back, I want to speak with you about Long Beach City, because I know you're running for City Council. But today, he is still a member of the Board of Trustees at Long Beach Community College District. My name is Brad Pomerance, and I thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.